2025 is finally here, which feels really weird to say. I mean, 2023 may as well have been yesterday given how it's making me feel, but hey, 2024 was a pretty great year for introducing me to more games. I've been trying to push myself more and more out of my comfort zone away from my Nintendo roots, which has been pretty easy this year since the Switch lineup has been kind of boring, personally. Nothing against anyone who likes these games. I mean, hell, I bought Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but I don't know, I just think I've been losing interest in the Switch over the past year and a half. I started the year by finishing off the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I don't know the general consensus, and I don't think it was the greatest idea to start with this instead of the original, since there were more than a few plot details that flew over my head because, frankly, it wasn't all explained super well. Nonetheless, the combat had me glued to my screen for a full week and a half, which RPGs hardly ever do. Each character having a different fighting style with unique skills that you're constantly having to juggle made this such an addictive game. And the boss fights, yeah, I love those. Give me more of that shit, man. It is the ultimate dopamine kick. And now I did want to better understand both sides of the story, so I did play the original at the end of the year so I could check out Rebirth and Crisis Core in 2025, and I liked it. I was surprised at just how short the Midgar section is, like, that's the entirety of the remake. In many ways, I think the added time spent in Midgar in the remake is a good thing for areas like the Cloud and Aerith sections, but at the same time, I don't think we needed the train cemetery expanded, especially with that obnoxious boss fight. But for the most part, I don't mind the expansions because it gives you more time to grow attached to these characters. I could honestly listen to the core group just talking for like an hour. The characterization of Cloud and Aerith are a little bit off in my opinion, but I think their respective voice actors do a great job of propping them up. Especially Aerith, she quickly became my favorite character. Someday I'd like to replay the remake to refresh my memory, but as it is right now, I think I prefer it over the original for a few reasons. I was pretty excited about the party lineup since there's a few optional characters you can recruit, but I ended up being disappointed by the party only being differentiated by their limit breaks, which I didn't even understand how to upgrade until I got to the Northern Cavern. I think it's a cool idea, but because it's not explained very well, I kind of forgot you could even unlock other limit breaks. That and the side content in FF7 frankly just sucks. I tried doing the Fort Condor quest once before getting bored, came back to it later, and I think it's so incredibly funny that it takes you 2 times longer to finish it if you actually engage with it rather than letting the general reach your base and just fight them head on. The side quests just don't add anything of worth to the experience, so I avoided doing them as long as possible. Because of this, Vincent was a constant in my party until I just had to swap out for Yuffie since her ultimate weapon shreds through the enemies in the final dungeon. Hell, even the final boss hardly stands a chance against her and Cloud's ultimate weapons. Vincent is still one of my favorites, but his limit break poses too much of a risk during the final fight since you have no control over his actions. I was expecting the ATB combat to be more difficult to adjust to, but it didn't feel a whole lot different from your average turn-based RPG. The only issue that the ATB combat brought up was with the item management. The inventory is such a mess. Like during the final boss's infamous attack, you kinda wanna ready up a healing item, but you have to scroll through every other item you collected up to this point. Why can I not just sort through my items like any other RPG, bro? Please be normal. Another constant issue I had was with the game's visuals, making it hard to distinguish which portions of a room led to another room. It doesn't help that there are areas that genuinely serve no purpose and hold no items or NPCs, so I ended up getting lost a few more times than I'd like to admit. Honestly though, I did enjoy my time with FF7, just that I think the hype and endless praise it's received over the years altered my expectations to a point where I felt a little bit disappointed by it. I can still say I would love to play more Final Fantasy games in 2025 though. I already have a few on my plate with FF7 Rebirth, Crisis Core 8, 9, 15, and 16, which are the main ones I'm most interested in playing at the moment. Initially, I wanted to play through the entire series in release order, and I did get around to FF1 this year, which I ended up feeling pretty mixed on, though leaning more on the positive side, which surprised me quite a bit. It does have its quirks and fetch quest fluff, though I found myself really enjoying the first 3 hours for how simple it is. It's a really easy game to jump into, at least for the Pixel remaster. Seeing the numbers go up makes my brain happy, and Final Fantasy loves its absurdly large HP meters. That being said, mechanically FF1 has the depth of a kiddie pool, as there's hardly any expansion made here. Midway through the game, your party can get an upgrade to their jobs, but I hardly noticed a difference in really any of their stats. I think my biggest issue with FF1 is just how repetitive it can get. I found myself really questioning how much longer I wanted to commit to the game, as frankly, there's not much outside of the combat and some of the exploration to prop it up. There is a lot of mindless meandering involved in progression, as the game can be somewhat vague with its hints. If you can figure out where you have to go, it's really satisfying because it all feels like a natural natural pipeline, but after the Earth Crystal boss, I found myself having a really difficult time tracking down my next objectives. Talking to villagers can help sometimes, but other times they just spout random nonsense instead. In fairness, this is an NES RPG and it's the first of the series, so looking at it through that lens, I can appreciate it a lot more for how the series would evolve later on. I enjoyed FF1, but even though it's certainly not a bad game, I can hardly recommend it unless you're really curious to see Final Fantasy's humble beginnings. When it came to FF2, however, I just felt like I was playing FF1 again. The problem I have is that the pixel remasters make the game so homogeneous, even with the changes made to the weapons and level ups, that it didn't feel like enough to differentiate from what I had just played. I'd still like to try and finish FF2 someday, but I can't lie and say that I don't have any interest in pursuing it or any of the other pre-PS1 games at the moment. Another RPG I tried to get through was Persona 3 Fez, which I don't know if I care for much. I've heard it's a slow burn, and what I've played definitely gives that impression because there's just nothing to the story and I'm like 12 hours into the game. I want to commit to finishing it just so I can say I've played at least one Persona game, but I'm not so sure when that'll happen. 2025 might have to be the year of the RPG for me, since there are a lot of them I would really like to check out and finish. There's a couple others I started this year like the Atelier Ravona series and Okami, both of which I got super hooked on at the start and just dropped for no reason. I really like what I've played of Atelier Ravona because it reminded me a lot of Pikmin with its gimmick. The whole idea revolves around an atelier you have to keep open, essentially an alchemy shop, by clearing these quarterly assignments made by the kingdom. Assignments can require a range of things, but they all involve synthesizing items at your cauldron, so you've got to go out in the world in search of various ingredients to synthesize these items for these assignments to ensure your atelier's safety. It's a simple but incredibly satisfying gameplay loop which is helped a lot by the extra requests you can choose to fulfill while working on your next major assignment. There isn't that much to the gameplay or combat as far as that's concerned, but it's the pick up and play nature that made it so addictive for me. It can also be pretty stressful since you're timed on these assignments, so you have to carefully manage your time since just about everything takes up a day or two. Not that it's hard to clear the core assignment, but there are extra requests you can do to fill this bingo sheet for bonuses like extra HP or MP, some money, and other things. Yet again, I have not gotten very far into the game, but if you want a game that balances a chill slice of life vibe with 500 billion side quests you can do, then I would highly recommend checking it out. Other than RPGs, one major investment for me in 2024 was survival horror games. This is not something I expected, like, at all. One day I decided to play Silent Hill 1 out of pure boredom, and from there I ended up playing just about every other entry barring Downpour. Silent Hill is such a fascinating series, and while there are a lot of misses, I don't think I'd say I regretted playing any of them, except for Homecoming. I get so confused as to why people even defend this game. Like, I've had someone tell me before that it actually isn't that bad before also saying they haven't even played it. In case you're curious, my favorite is probably Silent Hill 3. Given its reception, I expected to come out of the series with SH2 being my favorite, though I had a lot more issues with it. I definitely appreciate it more now, especially with that remake, but I digress. Shattered Memories is one of the most interesting entries post SH4 though, and I honestly think it's pretty decent. It doesn't quite hit the same highs as classic Silent Hill, but I love its iteration of the town. Never before has a town so dead felt so alive. I just wanted to explore everything this game had to offer, listen to every last audio. It's just such a fascinating game. It's a shame the survey intermissions don't actually affect your experience majorly. I feel like if Shattered Memories was made now, it could honestly be something really special. Back in the day, they must have really thought they were cooking because they put this warning before the game even starts, and like, this is so corny, man, I'm sorry. Anyway, it felt like for a while I couldn't go a week without finding a new survival horror game I wanted to check out, and I didn't get around to many of them really. I did play Resident Evil 7, which is so much better than I was expecting it to be. RE7 was actually my first exposure to the series as I watched a playthrough of it when I was much younger, so finally playing it for myself was kinda surreal, especially given that I actually chose to play Resident Evil 8 first. I can definitely understand why people might prefer 7 to 8 now, since as much as I liked RE8 at the time, it has a lot of really weak sections which pulled the game down a ton and makes it a lot less appealing to replay. Unfortunately, even 7 can't avoid that issue with the infamous boat section, but everything leading up to that point is so damn good that I don't even care. I love the Baker family. These guys are absolutely nuts, and having to deal with Jack stalking the house was almost scarier than my first experience with Mr. X because things feel so much more helpless with Ethan just being a regular dude. As the Baker property opens up, more little goodies can be found, which is something I always love about survival horror games. I mean, I found myself wandering back around the house so many times, it's not even funny. Really, my only ever issue with the game is its lack of enemy variety, and this one specific part in the mine where I couldn't figure out where to go because of an update made to the game's lighting that obscures a door to the point where I genuinely could not see it and was left circling the area for like 15 minutes thinking I was going crazy. Also, I streamed my playthrough of the game and I had another bizarre issue in the mine section where the Steam servers just went down and for some reason this weird pop-up came up over the screen and I just couldn't get it to go away. I couldn't do anything, I couldn't save, and I just had to sit there and wait for it to go away. Thank you, Capcom, very cool. Either way, Resident Evil 7 is a great experience and I would highly recommend it even if you are a newcomer. It is a perfect jumping point. Alone in the Dark and Fatal Frame are probably going to be two of my survival horror focuses for next year. I've been really curious about them for a few months now. I'd love to hear if there are any others I should check out, so please do let me know, especially if it's a PS2 era game. I love the vibe of these games so much, man. There's a few other horror games that I want to mention that I don't have as much to say about. Crow Country was an okay Resident Evil style survival horror game, pretty overhyped in my opinion. A lot of the puzzles were just really weak and I didn't care much for the area design. I wish it took better advantage of the theme park setting. I just didn't end up feeling satisfied with the interaction with the park attractions. In some way, Crow Country, the park itself, does feel accurate to a small town theme park, but when the puzzles are kinda lame, story is nothing special, and the combat is more annoying with yet again a lack of enemy variety, I just can't say I understood why people were putting this game on a pedestal next to the RE1 remake. No One Lives Under the Lighthouse was a very migraine-inducing game, super interesting and fun experience overall though. All you gotta do is fulfill your tasks around the small, desolate island, all while not letting it get to your head. And whatever you do, don't check the basement, just trust me. Dredge is a game that I nearly forgot about somehow, even though it was one of my favorite games I played last year. It's a semi-horror game mixed with a fishing simulator, sort of akin to those old Flash Tycoon games. You start off in a dinky little boat that seems like it'll explode if you hit just about anything, but over time you'll catch and sell more fish to upgrade the boat, allowing you to travel further and further to the outlying islands in search of artifacts for a mysterious collector. Getting these items means fulfilling requests from the island natives, which involves even more fishing, or you can seek out the many secrets this world hides to get hidden gear for your boat or take on side quests for others. This is another one of those easy pick up and play games that I still found myself coming back to even after the main story. I loved it so much that I honestly wanted to catch every fish in the game and clear every side quest. Unfortunately, I've heard mixed things about the DLC, but I'll have to check it out at some point to get my Dredge fix in again. Mad Father was okay. I had heard this was one of the better RPG Maker adjacent games, but I'll be honest, it was so goofy in nature, in a way that I couldn't tell if the developer wanted me to take the story seriously at all. Not just in the writing, but a lot of the scenes in this game, like the father chasing you down with a chainsaw with his stupid laugh. Like, please tell me I'm not the only one who completely lost any sense of immersion at this point. One game that I would love to make a video on someday, and is something that I initially thought was also an RPG Maker title, was Little Goody Two Shoes. Frankly, this game is just gorgeous. I love its storybook style mixed with 80s anime style characters. It is such a treat for the eyes. I honestly don't want to say anything more about this game because I think you should go into it knowing as little as possible. I almost forgot to talk about this next game because I just thought so little of it, but the last horror game I want to mention is Clock Tower. Most of you are likely familiar with the previously Japan exclusive SNES version, now readily available through the recent PC re-release, but I was a little more interested in checking out the PS1 sequel that we got here in the States. After playing it, however, I kinda wish I hadn't. Look, I try to keep an open mind with older games because they obviously aren't made with the same conventions available today, but Clock Tower is such a miserable slog of an experience. The story is simple enough, following the investigation of a crazed serial killer donning a comically large pair of scissors who had gone missing after an infamous murder case a year ago. Now he's returned, and the main character, Helen, goes in search of any information for how to stop this seemingly immortal killer. Fittingly, the game is written with just about the same quality as a B-grade horror flick, which I honestly cannot tell you if it was intentional, but I wish they had played on this aspect more because just about everything else in this game is just so boring and incredibly slow to get through. I was mainly interested in Clock Tower because it's a point-and-click horror game, not something I've seen really, but man, every last action you take in this game is so slow. I mean, even opening a door takes like 4 seconds. And it just gets worse when you interact with the wrong object and it triggers a chase with scissor hands. Now I'll admit that it was kind of funny the first few times. There are some ridiculous and hilarious traps you can trigger against scissor hands, like the door that leads straight off a cliff in the Barrows mansion. I must have used this trap 5 times. Like, how did he get back up here so fast? Of course, in saying that, you likely come to realize just how much time is wasted in chase with him, and when it comes down to it, that's where a bulk of my playtime was spent. That and being utterly confused as to what to do next. At a certain point, I finally cracked and dropped the game, which I hate doing that, but nothing about this game was giving me a worthwhile experience. The story was pretty whatever, the writing was corny, puzzles were nothing special, and I just couldn't put up with it anymore. Unfortunately, I've only heard the series gets worse with each entry, which is a shame, but I'd still like to give Clock Tower Rewind a chance at some point. As with just about every other year, I had a couple of multiplayer game obsessions, like of course Lethal Company and the classic 2-week Minecraft session, but there were a few games that particularly stood out to me. One of these was an indie title very clearly inspired by Overcooked titled Played Up. I wanted to say I enjoyed this game, but it can screw you over so fast. Overcooked as a roguelite is a really cool idea with a ton of potential that this game, unfortunately, just doesn't fulfill. Before each run, you get to choose from a set of floor plans for your restaurant, which is where my first issue comes in. Most floor plans are genuinely terrible, with only about 2 being worth your time on most runs. Whatever floor plan you choose, you're stuck with for the entire run. There are elements you can rearrange, like counters, dining tables, hobs, ingredients, and such, but you can't change the placement of walls or the length of the kitchen window. This is what instantly makes most floor plans useless, depending on the menu items you choose. After you've chosen a floor plan, you can choose from a list of menu items for the restaurant, but you can also have additional menu items added over the course of a run, which is something I highly recommend avoiding if at all possible. The main problem with this game as a roguelite comes in the builds you can create in terms of your abilities, your kitchen and dining room setup, because there is a clear best choice for floor plans and arrangement of kitchen and dining area essentials. You always want to choose the floor plan with the biggest kitchen, as the dining space is mostly negligible since you can fit most of the tables you'll need if you get creative. I was playing the game with a friend and we tried every floor plan, every menu item, just about every modification, as well as blueprints and blueprint upgrades, and once we hit a certain point I couldn't help but feeling like it wouldn't even be worthwhile to make it to day 15 and beat the game because it's always the same thing. There's just not enough variability here. Give us some more options to shake up the restaurant with some wacky level gimmicks like Overcooked had. That, or allow the players to upgrade the length of the serving window, pay to rearrange the placement of walls, that kind of thing. Even when I am enjoying myself, it ends quickly because of sudden queue backup. On a few occasions we got to day 15, but we lost because there was no possible way we could have served every customer and freed up enough tables for more, which makes me feel like this game just wasn't designed for any fewer than 4 players. I'm all for a challenge, but this game just feels plain unfair. Before Played Up, we had gotten into Astroneer, which is a game I've had lots of interest in for years. I've always been fascinated with the idea of a space survival exploration game and being able to hop between planets, each with their own unique ecosystems and new secrets and trinkets to discover. Unfortunately, Astroneer doesn't do a whole lot of interesting things with the concept. It is a very calming experience, but I don't know, man, it just feels like this game is really lacking in something. For a space exploration game, these planets are a half step at best towards feeling like actual alien planets. You'll find some evidence that life was once here, previous astronaut wreckage, but you never actually get to see anything alive, which I think is a huge missed opportunity. It leads this game to being a huge grind fest where, yes, you are taking across the planet to search for resources and going through space, but that's all I'm doing here. Wander around, collect resources, build a new thing to power the tower, collect more resources, power more towers, and eventually activate the planet's core before you're able to finally move on to the next planet, in which you just repeat that cycle again. The visuals of each planet only help so much to differentiate what feels like the exact same place I was just at too. I really hate to say it, but if I wasn't playing this with my friend, I would have dropped this in the first few minutes. I like my casual grinding games here and there, but I get my fill of them pretty quickly, and when that's 3/4 of the gameplay, you've got a recipe for a pretty boring experience. Other than that, I was feeling kinda nostalgic this year, so I went to play some old DS games I had always wanted to check out, like the Picross 3D games, and those were really fun games with a ton of content. Dementium was an intriguing case of one of maybe 2 or 3 survival horror games Wyrlwind on DS. Unfortunately, it's pretty mediocre, but I thought the story behind the game was fascinating. To my understanding, it was originally pitched as a Silent Hill DS game to Konami, which makes a lot of sense just looking at the final product. I'm kinda surprised they didn't jump at the opportunity. But hey, at least Resident Evil Deadly Silence has a friend. I'd love to know if there are any other horror games on DS. The only ones I know of are the two I just mentioned, as well as the Nameless game, which I've not heard great things about. I just want an excuse to play a new game on my DS, honestly. And that's just about everything I played this year. I had a lot more games I wanted to get around to, but certain addictions, which I will not speak about at this time, kept me from getting around to any of them. I already know that 2025 is going to be a booked up year for me. There's just so much in my backlog. So many games. Too many games. I know this video was incredibly disjointed, more so than last year's recap, but I don't really care, honestly. This is really just something for me, an excuse to ramble about a bunch of games I otherwise might not get to talk about again. There's a few games I mentioned here that I would like to revisit for their own videos, and one or two that I didn't mention at all that I will be making full videos on later this year. For the few of you who made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. Thank you to my longtime viewers for sticking around despite my horrendous upload gaps, and I truly do hope to see you again soon.